check whether anyone who needs translation headsets.
Who needs headphones for translation, newch chi ddangos nhw I gael o fanna. Os na.
Okay, if not, then we'll get started. I would like to just thank you very much for turning up this morning for an event which isn't part of the official programme of the Eisteddfod, but I'm sure that in its context and its intention belongs very closely to the spirit of this very special festival. My name is Hugh Jones and I'm currently the chair of the S4C Authority. And my role this morning is to introduce the speaker. Now, the relationship between the yw'r and the Eisteddfod in particular has a very close relationship with S4C. This week reaches people throughout Wales and Britain as a result of the investment that S4C do in broadcasting the festival. And it gives thousands of people satisfaction and enjoyment. And the purpose of the festival, which is to celebrate the best of our talent and culture, is an objective that's very close to the mission of S4C itself across the year. So, where better place for S4C to say something important about its own future? Now, S4C is looking forward beyond the current cycle to 2017 and beyond, because in March of that year, S4C's agreement with the BBC Trust around funding S4C will come to an end. But that is also when the BBC's contract with the government and the licence fee also comes to an end. And the BBC Charter will come to an end at the end of 2016. So, between now and then, there's a lot of discussion that will take place. That time will pass very quickly, so it's essential that the needs of Welsh broadcasting is considered within the same time frame. So what you're going to get today is S4C's first public contribution to the future of broadcasting through the medium of Welsh after 2017. There's a discussion document published today by S4C which bears the title The Future of Welsh Television. But before that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Chief Executive of S4C, Ian Jones. In the just over 2 years since Ian took over the helm, he has established one very important tradition. That is that things happen after a speech by Ian Jones in an Eisteddfod. When he gave the Owen Edwards Memorial lecture in 2012, he happened to say, in passing almost, that he couldn't see why S4C couldn't relocate its central activities from Cardiff to another part of Wales. As a result, and as we all know, was the decision that was taken a few weeks ago to relocate S4C's headquarters to Carmarthen in 2018. So you can take it, therefore, that a speech by Ian is always worth listening to. We are extremely lucky to have Ian as Chief Executive. He's got extensive and successful experience of working in the television industry on 3 continents. But he's never lost sight and the pride in the channel that he was one of its very first members of staff back in 1982. He's therefore in a very special position to understand and interpret the historical, the technical and cultural context to the question of what is needed to ensure the future of S4C. Please give Ian Jones a very warm welcome. Right, well, an Eisteddfod wouldn't be the same without Wellingtons and mud, so... Well, when I was in school, a long time ago now, I used to come home and the first thing I did was kick a football against the garage in Morriston. And even though there was no goalie in the garage back then, there was a number of attempts to score the goal of the century, but unfortunately I didn't succeed. But things were due to improve, and very often you will hear that joyous shout, 3 chances for a Welshman, or 3rd time lucky for a Welshman. And I saw myself back then as a combination of George Best and Pele. But 3rd time lucky for a Welshman is quite a common saying for us in Wales. And for me as a child, that's all it was. Just a interesting little saying or a proverb just to convey the dedication of a group of footballers who dreamt of spending their days playing for the Swans, or in my case, for some reason, for Brazil. Now, as I grew older, I came to realise that there's a lot more to the saying, third time lucky for a Welshman, and that there is an echo of the Welsh history which takes us back over a number of centuries. And I am certain that I'm not alleging that I'm a PhD or a lecturer on history, but there's something special about the number 3 for us in Wales, and that old tradition of the 3 British Isles is a proof of that. We enjoy sharing things in 3, which is an integral part of our history and our culture. And I find myself thinking along those lines from time to time these days. In my youth, the pop group Raglenni were singing about Cymru, Lloegr and Llanrwst. But perhaps today, I'm thinking more in terms of Wales, Britain and the world. That is the key 3 issues for Wales today. And can I just give you an example? We are here in Bala celebrating the success of our youth festival. It's only natural for us, as Welsh speakers, that we are proud in the vision of Sir Owen Edwards for the Welsh language, and the innovative and heroic work of Sir Ifan. Now, the earth is the strongest symbol of Welshness for us, especially here on the Eisteddfod field. However, for the rest of Britain, perhaps the Bala area is more familiar due to the attractions such as the Whitewater Rafting Centre and the gorgeous views. So that's the British perspective of Bala. If you go further afield, to the 4 corners of the world, to South America for example, it's possible that Michael D. Jones leading the Welsh to Patagonia will be something that will capture their minds from Bala. This is just one area, but it's one area that creates different images in people's minds, and that depends on their cultural background. And the same thing is true with S4C. Those of you who are here today will know that the main purpose of S4C is to satisfy the needs of the core audience, the Welsh-speaking core audience, and that is what makes us unique. There's no similar channel anywhere else, but we have a duty as well to include those who are less fluent in the Welsh language, those who are learning the Welsh language, and those who can't speak Welsh at all even. And that is the starting point of our remit. The audience in Wales. That is the first of the 3 issues that I intend to talk about. But in the current world, where we are partly funded through the licence fee and are accountable to the Department for Culture and Media in London, our image outside of Wales is just as important. The role and status of S4C should be an important part of any discussion about the BBC Charter, which will come to an end, as was said, at the end of 2016. And that date will be upon us soon. That discussion needs to take place and needs to be started now. And that's the second issue, the second part of our remit. And I will return to that later. Now, as we know very well today, the world is smaller than it's ever been, and the image or the the feeling about S4C is just as important outside of our national boundaries. When it was announced that Netflix in North America had bought a gwyll hinterland, the boost to the credibility of S4C on the international stage was extremely important. It can facilitate the way for more joint productions and co-productions. It can open doors in commercial markets. It can raise the profile of S4C in general. A Gwyl's first series, or Gwyll or Hinterland, was S4C's initiative. It was sold to BBC 4 and BBC Cymru bought the programmes in advance. Now, it was an interesting partnership. It included funding sources from the Welsh Government, the Media Fund in Europe, S4C Masnachol Commercial, and an investment from Thermopolis, a private company. The series was sold to yw'r, Danmarks Radio, in Denmark, before production started even. And for those of you who are interested in the Nordic noir, then you will know that yw'r were the producers of The Bridge and The Killing. And you will know that nowadays a Gwyll hinterland has been sold to places around the world. So that is the third issue. The way that people see S4C will depend on their location within these three, and it's my duty to ensure that the image that they see is clear, exciting and accurate, whoever they are and whatever their background is. About a month ago, one of the daily London newspapers praised the drama series 35 Diwrnod. There was huge praise to it in the daily paper. And according to the fashion, they compared it favourably with Scandinavian productions. When I turned over the page, there was a list of S4C programmes that were to be broadcasted that night. And all S4C's products came under regional variation. Now, I think that is the sign of the mindset about S4C in some circles. So it's important that we remind people that S4C is no regional variation. It is a national channel in its own right. A channel that not only offers entertainment, information, education, but is also a true force in the work of maintaining, sustaining a language and promoting an economy. When I worked in America and lived in New York, I learnt that one of the first things that come to people's minds on that particular content, when you think about Wales, is the name Dylan Thomas. And I really hope that the coverage that his name will get during the centenary celebrations will move the focus away from his way of life and in fact turn to his poetry. We in S4C will try to do justify with his magic on a number of pages over the next few months. But another point about Dylan Thomas's work that caught my eye recently was that as the exhibition of Sir Peter Blake's images moved from the National Museum to Pembrokeshire, the painter spent 25 years creating images of undermilk wood, and he would used to listen to recordings of undermilk wood at least twice a week during that period of painting. And it was a strange experience to read two comments by different reviewers about this exhibition. According to the first reviewer, the exhibition was a crown on Dylan Thomas's work, bringing undermilk wood alive. Peter Blake's images as if they disclosed a secret circle. But to the other reviewer, the exhibition and Peter Blake's work was a little bit without purpose, because Under Milkwood was a radio drama for voices, and that we should let the imagination create those images. Now, of course, the truth is that both reviewers had missed the point entirely, because they had forgotten one very basic thing, one very obvious thing, is that these were two individual creations in their own right. Peter Blake's exhibition stands on its own 2 feet as a piece of art, independent. And sometimes you need to remind people that S4C doesn't exist in the shadow of another channel. We are not an extension of another channel. We are not an interpretation of any other system. S4C is a national channel which is independent editorially and operationally. Now, the partnership between S4C and BBC is productive and positive. We have already shown that close cooperation, such as Gwyll hinterland, can benefit all. And that will happen again with the next series, which is already in the pipeline. This time, it will be a joint production between S4C and the BBC. But I very much hope that we can develop this to other areas. Radio Cymru, for example, is an obvious collaborative partner. And a number of you will remember that, after all, Come On Midfield started as a radio programme. But with S4C and Radio Cymru cooperating, Come On Midfield had a new home on telly. So there are a number of considerations for the future in that respect. Now, over the last few years, we have had to cut we've had to look after the pennies in an efficient manner. The financial cuts have meant a reduction of 36% in real terms. And it's almost inevitable that we've had to lose staff internally and externally in the television sector. At its peak, S4C employed over 200 staff, but that figure has now gone down to about 125 by nowadays. The programme budget, on the other hand, has had to reduce £18 million. And on top of that, we will face further reductions this year, next year, and the year after of 1% in the value of the money that we get from the licence fee. There have been significant cuts, but I am confident that that hasn't undermined the provision on screen so far. And I'm extremely grateful to everyone internally and externally for the cooperation and the support we've received. But there's not much left to be cut anymore. We've already cut to the bone, and any further cuts would endanger the spirit of the channel. I measure my words very carefully when I say that further cuts would endanger the services of S4C and would endanger the identity of S4C. And that is what's in the balance. When the government announced in 2011 that the central contribution to the S4C budget had been protected, don't forget this, that was only until April 2016. We don't know what will happen to the government's contribution in London after 2016. And that isn't the only uncertainty facing us. The BBC Charter itself will come to an end very soon afterwards. So we don't know either what will be the fate of that financial source in the future either. Therefore, now is the time to initiate a discussion on ensuring that we have long-term sufficient funding for S4C. it is essential that we get sufficient money to create certainty for the future. But the key question is this. What is sufficient money in our context? Well, I intend to tell you a story to try and answer that question. Now, I have to admit that I'm very fond of that little story about two women arguing noisily, shouting at each other across the street, from one bedroom window to the other bedroom window. Then, two friends walked along the road underneath them, and one said to the other friend, they will never settle their differences because they're arguing from different premises. Now, I very much hope that we will not have to argue with anyone about the future of S4C, but I also hope that we will come from the same premise, that we will come from the same starting point in this discussion, and that we will all accept the same principles for the future of S4C. That foundation means that we accept that we are an unique channel and that we need independent editorial and operational principles to run the channel. We are a unique channel. What other channel has to depend and base its services on the prosperity of a minority language, where we need to get the viewers to take ownership over that language? And what other channel also shoulders the responsibility of creating cultural impact and economic impact? And that is in addition, of course, to the responsibility, the usual responsibility of measuring value for money, ensuring acceptable viewing standards, and sufficient appreciation from the viewers. And on top of all of that, we are expected to be everything for everyone, creating the same role as BBC One, BBC Two, Channel 4, Sky, and a number of other channels all in one. Let me remind you of the current funding stream. At the moment, 90% of our funding comes under the licence fee through the BBC Trust, and that will continue until April 2017. That corresponds to 76 million. Some 8% or 6.7 million comes directly from central government in London, and we have promise of that money until April 2016. Now, I very much hope that the chiefs of the BBC in London, officers and members of the BBC Trust will see their contribution to S4C programming, and that it will be a subject of pride. And they do have room to feel proud. It would be a great pity to think that anyone would consider to fund S4C as something that is a burden on BBC funding. Considering the 3.6 billion that's available for the BBC throughout Britain every year, a contribution of 76 million, which is less than 2% of that total funding, to run a national channel in a minority language is not asking too much. We should also add that it's not a very good start to any discussion when some people are arguing that one of the decisions for bringing BBC Three to come to an end was that the BBC were having to fund additional services, such as the BBC World Service and also S4C. After 2 years of trying to reiterate and 4 years of cuts, I am very keen for this next period in the history of S4C to be a period where we have financial security from more than one sources and that we get sufficient funding. In conclusion, the last thing I want to do today is to sound that we are complaining. I don't want to give that impression. We are very lucky. We've got an excellent team of people working with us, whether they are internal staff, independent producers externally, These are talented people within the BBC as well, working with us. Now, I would venture to say that this team has already proven that we are making excellent use of public funding. Consider the intention to relocate the headquarters of S4C to Carmarthen. That is an exciting step in itself. But at the same time, it makes financial sense. We already know that Arad Research Company have shown that any investment by S4C in Wales, so any spending in S4C, brings further additional value. So for every pound that is spent, there will be an economic value of almost £2 created. And since S4C was created 30 years ago, Wales have benefited from 2.2 billion from S4C. And that is additional money on top of everything else from central government. This is on top of everything or anything that Wales would have received. So that is the economic effect that S4C has created and generated. But at the moment, funding in the future is out of our hands, and with every month that goes by, we are losing valuable time. The problem is that TV programmes need careful planning. A drama series, for example, can take years to come to the screen because you need to discuss ideas, develop scripts, long before production starts. It's about time for this discussion to take place about the future funding of S4C, because we are now having to make decisions about that time, and that places us in quite an impossible situation. And obviously, that discussion needs to be part of the wider picture about the new charter of the BBC. For 3 years now, the relationship between S4C and the BBC Trust has been excellent. And the relationship between myself and the head of the BBC in Wales is very good as well. Now, the reason for that is that there's a formal agreement which we have signed alongside the Department for Culture and Media in London. That agreement was signed back in 2011. We've also got an operational agreement between the two organisations which guarantees independent editorial and operational. And that defines to what purpose the money we receive is used. Those agreements are about to come to an end, so it's now time to lay the ground for a new period. So what does preparing the ground mean in this context? Well, in my opinion, it's essential. It's essential that S4C are part of the discussion about the discussion around the new BBC Charter. S4C should be part of the work because the Charter will affect us to such an extent. And we need to consider whether there should be a clear and specific provision in the new charter for S4C. I'm very keen to remind everyone who's looking at broadcasting in Britain that S4C is a complete, comprehensive service. That is what makes us unique and valuable. And that is what we need to protect. And in amongst any possible reorganisation, it's essential that S4C and the Trust and the authority remain separate. The S4C and the authority need to remain separate to ensure that we are operationally and editorially separate. At the moment, we are in a period of excitement and success in S4C. The audience are appreciative, we've got a good reputation around the world, and our plans bode well for the future. And our creative prosperity and economic development is dynamic. But there is a dark cloud above us. And the nightmare for me would be to reach April 2016 without an assurance about the funding from the government, and then by April 2017 we wouldn't have a formal agreement beyond. However, it's possible it might be an even bigger nightmare for the Secretary of State if this happens, because he or she would have statutory requirement to give us the money, even in a period of financial austerity. The Public Organisation Act in 2011 places a statutory duty on the shoulders of the Secretary of State in the Culture Department to ensure that there is sufficient money for S4C. And you will see why I use that wording, sufficient funding. But what I'm worried about, and what others are worried about, is that things could change. So it would be nice to get that certainty over the next few months, certainly in the months leading up to next year's general election. Talking about duties under the Act, well, there is a legal obligation on the Department for Culture and Media to hold a review of S4C's work before the end of this year. Now, at the moment, there's no sign that that will happen at all. So rather than wait for that discussion to start in other places, we in S4C held our own review. We wanted to find out the length and breadth of sufficient money, what it actually means, what we needed to realise our intention and purposes of the next decade. And we will be publishing a document, this one, later on this morning, or today. The first step as we produced the document was to try and predict what the needs will be over the next few years. We wanted to decide on the priorities that arise from that. Because we are monitoring the habits of our audiences and also looking at the evolution of technology, it's possible to see tendencies and trends, and therefore we can plan in advance for that. The message that we hear is that people will continue to consider the traditional television set as their main source of viewing programmes, whether that may be live or recorded. But the use of other platforms is obviously increasing, and there will be an increasing demand for the TV set to be a more interactive medium, offering additional information and more choices. Perhaps you saw an announcement a few weeks ago that we'll be reintroducing high-definition service over the next couple of years. Now, with half of our audience being able to receive HD through satellite, we don't have any choice but to reintroduce that service. This will all cost a lot more money, of course, but those who are in charge of the purse strings have to accept that a national channel deserves sufficient funding. It's a long time for us to forget about S4C as a Cinderella in the broadcasting word. This shouldn't be a poor relation. S4C should be a national treasure, and there is a price to be paid for a national treasure. Since I started in this role, I have emphasised that S4C programmes should be available anywhere, any place, in any way, and the work of trying to ensure that continues. This provision will improve as more programmes become available on the BBC iPlayer from the autumn onwards. We will see more and more in the future that it won't just be programmes available. There'll be all types of content, so smartphones and tablets will become a natural part of our provision in S4C as we continue to maximise the use of apps and social media. It's more important than ever that the S4C brand can be seen across all platforms. That is the essence of plurality. But at the end of the day, we know that these platforms are just a medium. Let us not lose sight of the fact that it's the content and the quality of content that's important. And that's how we will be evaluated at the end of the day. That and the language impact, the cultural impact, the economic impact of S4C, and the appreciation of S4C. And let's not forget the viewing figures, of course. Or in particular, what experts say, reach. Experts call it reach. So how many people turn in to watch S4C over a period of time? Now, I think that the majority of people would be willing to admit that S4C is very successful in children's programming. And the progression of Q and the amount of people that follow Q bears witness to the fact that it's really captured the imagination of children in Wales. But unfortunately to us, this service doesn't count when it comes to measuring the reach of the audience, because young viewers are not usually contained in viewing figures. And that is what S4C needs to face. For how long can we maintain this excellent service for children if viewing figures are the only criteria for measuring success and for making decisions? My opinion about this obsession with viewing figures in Britain is very well known, because I have said numerous times that we need to look much further than just measure the success of a public service and a minority service to see how successful it is. There are a number of measuring sticks, rather than just viewing figures in peak times and the cost per hour per viewer. They aren't the best ways to measure a unique service such as S4C. The truth is that the world has changed with viewing patterns. One example is the numbers that watch programmes on computer, on a phone or a tablet. For example, last year we saw a 41% increase in the use of our provision online. That means that 4 million viewing sessions were held online in 2013. Also, every broadcaster in Britain saw a reduction in 7% of their viewing figures during the first quarter of this year. So you will see that we have to be very, very careful before jumping to conclusions at a whim when you don't consider the full picture. So, as we look to the future, I very much hope that we will be able to produce more dramas, more high-quality dramas, and the money that will be released by bringing the Publicum Omnibus to an end, which is worth about £2 million, that will help as we try and produce more new drama. I'm confident that people will see that we are diverting this money for good use. I am determined to get new original dramas on screen and to create more opportunities for authors, for scriptwriters, for actors and for directors. Perhaps we can never go back to the good old days when S4C were able to afford a new drama every Wednesday and every Sunday night throughout the year, but at least we can improve the current situation. 3 weeks ago, a parliamentary debate was held on S4C in Westminster. It was initiated by Glyn Davies, the Montgomeryshire Member of Parliament. We had members from all parties taking part in the debate, and they showed their full support to the channel. But more importantly, they expressed a wish that the Department for Culture gave assurances as soon as possible to the future funding of S4C. As I said at the beginning of this speech, unfortunately, we haven't had that assurance from the Minister, even though he did speak very warmly about the channel and its programming. But I'm sure that a number of Welsh MPs will continue to put pressure on the government to get this job done. And by the way, I was very much heartened to see such a mature attitude by MPs when they touched on the viewing figures. Obviously, they understood and appreciated the situation. In the early days of S4C, I remember Owen Edwards telling a story about himself. He went on a visit to Ysgol Llanuwchlyn, and the teacher asked the class who recognised the guest speaker. Owen expected someone to say that he was head of S4C, or that Owen was a former presenter of Heddiw, the programme. But the answer they got, "Sir, I know who he is. He's the son of the statue in the village of Llanuwchlyn." So I intend to finish and conclude my speech this morning by reminding you of the vision of these two people that have been remembered forever in the statue in Llanuwchlyn. As we see more and more Welsh villages become anglicised, Sir Ifan ab Owen Edwards asked a question in the magazine Cymru'r Plant back in 1922. And that question was, what can we do as children of Wales to keep the Welsh language alive? Now the answer to that question that was asked nearly a century ago can be seen very clearly around us this week. We can see it on the stage and around the field. That question led to the establishment of the Urdd, and thank God for their vision and for the work of the Urdd over the last few years. Now, if someone asked us this week, what can we do, the people of Wales, to keep S4C alive? I very much hope that I have given you the answer. I think that we need a public debate about broadcasting through the medium of Welsh. And that discussion needs to take place over the next months. That will be an opportunity to put pressure and to continue to put pressure to get sufficient funding for the channel. We need long-term assurance and operational and editorial independence. We need to ensure that the third time lucky brings new stability, long-term stability for S4C. Thank you very much. Right, well, thank you very much for that, Ian, for your personal vision, which of course is a vision about the essence of S4C, a channel that we are all deeply interested in. I think there are cups of tea still going strong in the back there. I know that Ian will have a chat with some members of the media now, but of course the invitation this afternoon is for all of us to continue this discussion, to embrace the questions that have been set by Ian and in this document that is being published now, to ensure that we have a lively debate over the next few months. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you very much, Ian.